Hi there. Today I've journeyed the furthest I've ever come to cover a dark deed. I am in Aberdeenshire, near Inverurie, which is a few miles to the northwest of Aberdeen. I hope it shows to any subscribers who are not in Perthshire that I'm trying to cover as much of Scotland as possible. So hopefully one day I'll be doing a story from your neck of the woods. We've come to look at the case of a woman murdered on the 3rd of December 1864. In fact, you can almost see the site she was murdered at from the church here where she was laid to rest. I hope you find the story as interesting as I did. On the Friday evening of the 2nd of December 1864, Margaret Thompson received a visit at home in Castlebrae, Aberdeen. Margaret's friend, Anne Forbes, tapped at her window at 8 p.m. Anne was after a loan of some clothing, as she was planning to leave early the next morning and walk to Inverurie to meet a gentleman friend. Anne was married to William Forbes, a shoemaker who was bedridden and quite a bit older than his wife. In the past, Anne had told her friend all about the relationship she had with this unnamed man who gave her money. It seems that the two had a child together at one time. Whether this child lived or died is unclear. The last time Anne took off to get money from the man, she met a sailor on the way and was persuaded to join in drinking a bottle of rum. Anne planned to leave for Inverurie at 8 or 9 in the morning, saying she would return by 9 or 10 the same night. Margaret loaned her friend a petticoat and a tartan shawl. As Anne set out to start her journey, she carried a letter, although she could not write. Anne would ask a friend, Eliza, to write letters for her. Eliza would address them to a Geo Stephen, wood merchant, Port Elphiston. Many of Anne's neighbours knew about the relationship she had with this man. She had told John Stewart that if she did not get any money, she would expose him. On the Saturday the 3rd, Anne Roy, who worked for George Smith, an innkeeper in the village of Kintore, served Anne half a gill of whisky. Anne drank half of it and said she would pay for the drink and finish it when she returned later that day. This was not the first time the inn had served Anne under this arrangement. On the Saturday afternoon, 10-year-old Hans George Leslie Mollison was going to Port Elphiston when he saw a woman wearing a green tartan shawl sitting on a dyke at the lodge house at Thainston. The woman had a bit of red flannel on top of her head. Shortly after that, a lady called Jane Isaac passed the woman and spoke to her about the bad walking. As Jane walked up the road towards Port Elphiston, she passed a man walking towards her who was carrying an axe. Jane turned round as the man passed and saw him stop and talk to the woman sitting on the wall. The man and woman then disappeared into the woods. And Mrs. Duncan also saw the woman sitting on the wall near the lodge, and then the same woman walk into the woods with a man. Mr. Fisher, owner of Thainston House, was shooting in the woods. John Forbes Cruikshank, a 14-year-old boy, was beating in the woods along with coachman George Campbell. John stumbled upon a woman lying on her side in the undergrowth, a pool of blood under her head. This woman was badly injured, with a wound to the back of the head. Her hand was twitching amongst the leaves. A green tartan shawl sprawled over one shoulder. The woman wore dirty white stockings, a tattered dress and petticoat. A red piece of flannel was still in place on her head. John called on his companion and then to Mr. Fisher, who ordered the coachman to get a dog cart and go and fetch help. As the cart was brought, Mary Milne, who lived in the lodge, was sought. When Mary saw the woman, she remembered seeing her before on a number of occasions. The last time in August, earlier that year. That time Mary gave the woman a drink of water. Before the woman was moved, Dr. Alex Irvin arrived at the scene. He looked at the injured woman and then told those present to get a door and use it as a stretcher so the woman could be moved into the lodge house. At that time, Mary Milne noticed a letter in the folds of the woman's dress. It was removed and the envelope bore the name Mr. Geo Stephen, wood merchant. While the doctor was at the scene, he'd noticed a nearby tree stump. Thinking that this woman may have fallen and hit her head on the stump, the doctor went over to take a look. He noticed that there was no sign of blood on or near the stump. By the time the woman was taken to the lodge house, it was about 4 in the afternoon. She hung on to life, although never regaining consciousness until 8 that night, when she lost the fight and died. In the meantime, George Stephen had been arrested by the police. He was at his house that he shared with his mother and 2 nieces in Port Elphiston.
Explore Castle Menzies after dark.
Is it really haunted?
Is it really haunted?
Book now to find out.
If you dare.
George was sitting in an armchair by the fire. The police took George to the lodge house, where Anne Forbes lay clinging to life. He was asked if he knew the woman, and said he did not. George was then taken to the railway station at Kentore, and there his clothing was removed and examined. No traces of blood were found on those clothes. George Stephen was then transferred to Aberdeen Prison. Later that night, Dr. Ogston, a professor in medicine at Aberdeen University, arrived, and when shown the body of Anne, he carried out a post-mortem in the lodge. Ogston found 2 wounds on the woman's head. The largest was 4 inches in length and had fractured the skull. The smaller was T-shaped and 1/4 of an inch long. A plaster cast was made from the wounds. Dr. Ogston stated that death had been due to an act of violence inflicted during life, probably being struck on the head by the back of an axe. On the Sunday, several axes were taken from George Stephen's house and delivered to Dr. Ogston, and one was found to be blood-stained. Red fibres, the same colour as the red flannel covering Anne's head, was also discovered on one of the axe heads. Along with the axes, letters from Anne Forbes addressed to a dear friend. In one letter Anne says, "I am very sorry that I troubled you again, as you were so angry with me the last time." The letter, dated the 30th of November, asked for a meeting the next Saturday, the day of the murder, between 1 and 2 at the lodge. The letter also states that the 2 of them have known each other for 27 years. It seems that George Stephen had been a successful businessman who, along with his brother, ran a wood merchant's in Port Elphiston. The death of his brother saw a downturn in business. Then George suffered a bout of ill health, probably some sort of stroke. This took place in August and seemed to have affected his mental health, where he was described by his mother as turning childish, just like a bairn. George became convinced they had no money, nothing to sleep on but a pile of stones. He thought that the family had no fire, despite one roaring in the grate. His speech was affected, becoming so bad some people struggled to understand him. This resulted in losing the house that he owned, having to sell and then become a tenant in the house that was once his. Anne was taken to the watch house in nearby Kentore churchyard. The Inspector of the Poor made arrangements for a funeral, and on the 8th of December, Anne Forbes was buried in Kentore Church. Amongst the mourners were her brother, who was a sailor. George Stephen was tried for murder at the Circuit Court at Aberdeen on the 18th of April 1865. When asked to plea, the prisoner, who was described as pale and grave, answered loudly, "I plead guilty." Unusually, the prisoner's counsel spoke to the judge, implying the prisoner was insane at the time of the attack. Once again, the judge asked George to plea, and again the man in the dock pled guilty. After various discussions between the judge and the legal teams, it was decided that George was capable of pleading, but at the time of the crime, he was insane. It was decided to try the prisoner for the crime committed on the 3rd of December. Various family members and friends spoke of George Stephen's declining mental health in the months leading up to the murder of Anne Forbes. Doctors spoke of his illness and how it affected his brain. One doctor, Robert Johnston, who was the resident medical superintendent at the Royal Lunatic Asylum, was asked if someone with brain disease like George's might, when excited or irritated, have an uncontrollable urge to commit acts of violence. The medical man answered that it might, and if so, he would not be surprised. When asked if he thought at the time of the murder George was insane, Robert Johnston replied, "I would say he was insane." After all the evidence was heard, the jury returned a guilty verdict, and George Stephen was sentenced to hang in Aberdeen on the 17th of May. It was clear to all that George was of unfit mind when he committed the murder, and almost immediately an appeal was launched. The execution date came and went, and on the 3rd of June a pardon was sent from the Crown Office in Edinburgh. This reprieve from the sentence of death was changed to a life sentence of penal servitude. So if you're local and you attend the car boot sale, which is held on a Sunday at the Aberdeen and Northern Marts, then just remember poor Anne Forbes, who was attacked nearby. I think the assault actually took place in what is now the A96. It's a dual carriageway, and I think now where she was actually attacked is part of the modern road network. I wasn't sure how to pronounce Thainston, so I kind of took a guess. Probably got it wrong. I kind of assumed that they didn't call it Thainstone, so I thought maybe Thainston or Thainstane. I'm not sure. So if you want to let me know, I'd be interested. Oh, and one more thing. The Lodge House. I tried to keep a respectable distance. I didn't film it. I just took a photograph because I wouldn't like anybody filming my house. So I just hope that, if you know anybody that lives there, I did try and stay respectful, keep my distance and not encroach on anybody's privacy. If you've enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. You might like to take one of our dark history tours, ghost tours, or paranormal investigations that are held in Perthshire, Glasgow and Stirling. If so, please visit our website, which is www.historyandhorrortours.com. Thank you.